Chapter 3, Mishnah 5. If someone moistens produce with dried mud, i.e. mud that was mostly dry on the surface but still contains some of the water from which it was formed, Rabbi Shimon says that the law regarding the hechsher of the produce depends on the following. If the mud is wet enough to moisture an object with which it comes into contact, the wetness on its surface is considered a liquid, and thus the produce is included in the law of b'chiyutan, i.e. it is prepared for tuma. But if the mud is not so wet, the wetness on its surface is not considered a liquid, and so the produce is not included in the law of b'chiyutan. A similar case. If someone sprinkles water on the dirt floor of his granary, storehouse for grain, in order to prevent the dust from rising, and then he put wheat in the granary, he need not be concerned that it was moistened by the water and thus became prepared for tuma. This is because the dirt floor of a granary is very dry. We therefore assume that the water he sprinkled on it was immediately absorbed into the ground. By the time he placed wheat on the granary floor, there was not enough moisture to cause hechsher. The Mishnah discusses a third situation. People would store their produce in grass because the natural moisture in the grass makes the produce wet and keeps it fresh. The moisture of grass is not one of the liquids that can cause hechsher. However, in the Mishnah's case, the grass was gathered early in the morning, when the blades were still wet with dew, which can cause hechsher. If one gathers blades of grass when dew is upon them, in order to store and moisture kernels of wheat with them, i.e. with the natural moisture of the grass, the wheat kernels are not included in the law of b'chiyutan. Although the owner wanted his wheat to be moist, he intended only that it should be moistened by the natural wetness of the grass, which, as mentioned above, is not one of the 7 liquids that can cause hechsher. He did not intend that it would be moistened by the dew, which can cause hechsher. But if he specifically intended to do this, i.e. to pick blades of grass when they were wet with dew, so that both the grass itself and the dew will keep his produce fresh, the wheat is included in the law of b'chiyutan, since in this case he wants his wheat to be wetted by the dew prepares it for tuma. The Mishnah cites a basic dispute about the rule that hechsher does not take effect unless the owner is pleased. Tanaim disagree whether it is enough for him to be pleased in his thoughts alone, or whether he must also perform an action that expresses his pleasure. Regarding one who was transporting wheat to the mill to grind into flour, and rain fell on it and wet the wheat. If he is happy that it became wet, it is included in the law of b'chiyutan. Although he did not do anything that would express his satisfaction, his happiness itself is enough for hechsher to take place. But Rabbi Yehuda says it is impossible not to be happy about the wheat becoming wet. Nevertheless, there is no hechsher unless he deliberately stopped traveling for a moment, so that the wheat would become wetter. According to Rabbi Yehuda, hechsher is not affected merely because the owner was pleased. Rather, he must perform an action that expressed his pleasure.